What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, another week of college football, another round of upsets. We have still hit a historic margin of AP top 25 teams losing in the first 5 weeks of the season, but I mean, we're going to get to it in just a second. It seems like there is a ton of parity, and then there's just two teams sitting on top of all the parity. And that makes for a fun season, to be honest with you. I've been on Twitter a little bit talking about, hey, maybe the BCS wasn't so bad with this whole two teams thing. But, hey, another fun weekend. A lot more games to talk about outside the top two.
Yeah, this is going to be good. I mean, I'm interested to see kind of how these narratives end up playing out. You know, we jokingly will say, this team is out or this team is out after only one loss, but we quickly forget that losses happen. And if this team ends up, if an Ohio State ends up being, 12-1 because they win the conference and everything, you're going to forgive that loss to Oregon. Or if Oregon has this one loss, then, you might forgive it if it's, if they are convincing in the rest of their games or whatever the case. One loss doesn't get you out. Now, Clemson, on the other hand, being two losses and then just still stubbing their toe, is, two losses, maybe the you're out.
But if we focus on the playoff too much, man, we're gonna miss some fun games because, look, it may not have that much playoff implications, but, well, it kind of did. But, I mean, Kentucky, Florida was fun. Auburn, LSU was fun, even outside of playoff talk.
It doesn't take anything away from the playoff.
Oh, yeah.
Or from my attention to watch those games.
And these games mean something to these kids. And so, man, my challenge to other media outlets, let's pause playoff talk. It's October 3rd. There's a lot of fun football going on. Like, let's enjoy it. It's so much. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games of stats pulled up because those are just the highlights we have to hit. There is so much going on in college football. I mean, this has been a fun season. You know, Josh Pate of 24/7 Sports kind of coined the Renaissance season. And gosh, it has been that to this point. But man, let's start at the top. You had two top 12 ranked v ranked matchups, including the top two teams in the country. Georgia playing host to Arkansas at noon, Alabama playing host in that 3:30 slot on CBS to Ole Miss. And everyone kind of circled this as, ooh, here we go. First challenge for the big boys. And then Vegas comes out and drops, an 18-point spread for Georgia, a 14.5-point spread for Alabama. And, the Georgia line comes down with JT Daniels not playing right before the game, but both teams easily cover. And I think my biggest point is kind of about both teams, and that is, both teams cover with ease. And I don't walk away from the game saying, oh, Arkansas and Ole Miss weren't that good. Now, I think there is a large tier 2 and 3 in college football this year. Like, I think teams 3 to 40, there might be a whole lot of parity. But the bottom line is, to this point, Ole Miss and Arkansas had absolutely earned their rankings. I just think the gap between Alabama and Georgia in the field is very large. And the more we do these rankings, the more like these power rating stuff, the points are there too. I mean, you saw the number 8 team in the country, and I know it was in Athens, but 18 points is what Vegas thought of that. And then an Ole Miss offense that we know can score, Vegas has 14.5. And I mean, the cool thing about both of these games was Georgia and Alabama now have the ability to beat you two different ways on offense. I know everything is about the passing game, but both teams beat their opponents this weekend with a power run game because both defenses dropped 8. I was in Athens for the Arkansas-Georgia game. When Arkansas walked out in the 3-2-6 and Georgia had their first run go up the middle for 8 yards, I was like, that's going to be a long day if they don't adjust that. And Georgia runs the ball 56 times and throws 11 passes with the backup quarterback, wins 37-0. Daniel, I just walk away very impressed with Alabama and Georgia. And is it too early to be excited for December 4th?
I'll say it's never too early to be excited about the future. first of all.
Thank you.
But you should also be excited about the present. The ride to get there,
Mm-hmm.
as we've already seen so far, and as you were saying, there's no reason to only focus on
Right.
the playoff. Um, I mean, my goodness, the anticipation is always just going to drive you to see that, because that will be a collision course. I mean, these two teams are just basically a sprint to that game. But let's just sit and enjoy the scenery as we go through, because as I think it was Dane Young on Twitter said, there's like 4 top 10 teams this year.
Right.
And I couldn't, and I think that's just a very accurate picture of, hey, it's tough to put these teams in the top 10, because immediately you get blowback from people saying, oh, it's just this or just that. Again, I love our XPR rankings. And then, there's the AP poll and these others. They don't really matter until we get the college football playoff rankings.
Yep.
So none of them really matter.
Yep.
But obviously people love to talk about them. But, it's like if you put someone in the top 10, people are going to argue and say they're not a top 10 team. But then you and I just look down the list and say, okay, put somebody else in front of them for me.
Right. Right.
I'm happy to let you do it. Because someone was saying something about Kentucky. I think, I saw something with them coming out as like number 10 for somebody. I'm like, I mean,
Sure.
they just beat Florida. They're 5-0. I mean, whatever. So it's a fun season. It's fun to debate those kinds of things. I agree with you. Those two teams, what it really shows me is that about, we talk about all offseason about how important it is to recruit. Because I think just the balance of those rosters, that they can do this, speed up and throw it around the yard. But when they run into teams who are going to do that, where they drop 8 or whatever the number is, they run 3 down linemen, 3-man front, whatever. When they run into those teams, I mean, they have no problem trusting their top 100 players on the offensive line and their top, their 5-star running backs that they've just stacked on top of one another in both backfields. They have no problem trusting them to just turn and hand it to them. And if they're just getting 5 yards a pop, that's lucky for the defense, because honestly, that they keep doing that, it's going to turn into 8 and 10 yards towards the end of the game, because unless they make adjustments. So they can beat you both ways. So that's what's so exciting about both of these teams, I think, because it's going to be just interesting to see how they will attack one another. Because you usually try to take away what the other person does better.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just
A
interested
lot of
to
coaching
see.
in that matchup.
Well, that's what, Kirby said that this week about Barry Odom, the defensive coordinator for Arkansas, that he really likes to make you play left-handed. He likes to take away what you do well. Well, Georgia's been very explosive in the passing game thus far this year, and very average, which has been weird for Georgia, more average at running. And so they felt the challenge this week, and they obviously came out and answered it. And honestly, the Alabama score is not indicative of what that game was. I don't want to credit them with 2 garbage time touchdowns for Ole Miss, but that's almost what it felt like. Alabama was on, I think that if Alabama cared about keeping them out of the end zone the last little bit, I think that they could have held them to 7. So I don't want to get off on hey, it's, I think Georgia's defense is better than Alabama's, but I don't think it's, we got to give credit to that offense at Ole Miss, at how they can just turn and get some points real quick, if they need to.
Yeah, Ole Miss. I mean, at the start of the fourth quarter, it's 42-7.
Right.
So, they took 8 minutes to score that drive, like that touchdown drive, the first one in the fourth quarter. That game was a blowout. Yeah, I think my other big takeaway from these two games is, as you look across the college landscape and think about, hey, who's kind of sticking out as a Heisman favorite right now? I understand Matt Corral and Bryce Young sticking out so far. And if you're talking best quarterback play, I think Bryce Young has played like the best quarterback in the country so far. But if you're talking about a player, or in my case, a unit that has just stuck out as far and away the best unit or group of players in college football, it's Georgia's defensive line. And it's like each one of them has a breakout game. And in this game, it was Devontae Wyatt for Georgia. But gosh, it'd be hard to tell me that there's not a better player in college football than someone like Jordan Davis, like in the way he's playing.
Yeah.
And if the award's the best college football player in the country, I just wouldn't be surprised at this point if a Georgia defensive lineman ends up in New York. The problem is the stats won't be there because pick your poison. Like Kobe D might end up having the most sacks, like an inside linebacker. So shout out to that unit. I wish there was a defensive line award like there was a Jim Moore award for the offensive line or Joe Moore award, but maybe we'll make
they
it
really
up.
should make like at least a front seven award or something.
Right,
I think that'd
right.
be cool. And then a secondary award because that's a unit too.
So Georgia and Bama, I mean, there's a gap there, right? Like there's an obvious and clear gap between Georgia and Bama in the field. Yeah. I mean, Georgia or Bama, who do you think's looked the best at this point? Just like quick answer.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a situation where I was having to trust a quarterback, Bryce Young's been healthy and been available. So yep. I think that Bryce Young's looked the best. You're asking about the team, though. I think Georgia has the better front seven, and they've won games with their backup quarterback. So to me, that's just, I don't know if Alabama would be as dominant with their backup quarterback. But I would anticipate that they would play Bryce Young in the game. So it would be a close game. Obviously, if I'm picking today, I would probably lean Georgia because of what I've seen from the front seven. Because it's not just like in years past, I feel like if I talk about a team and their front seven, it's like, oh yeah, they're pretty good. But it's like, this is kind of in another category where every single one of these players will be on an NFL roster playing in NFL games, not close to the 53rd man where they're going to get cut. They're like either the starter or the immediate backup or one of the two starters. Like they're all guys that every single one of them. And it's not like there's an outlier. If they are a starter or honestly second team on this unit, it's just these guys are all over Mel Kiper's draft board. So because this year has been a little different than last year where it was all about, the offense and the QB and all this stuff, I still think that that's going to obviously be very important down the stretch. I feel like it's almost been a rejuvenation for defenses this year, and Georgia's got the best one.
And it's not close. I think if I'm saying who's been the best team to this point, it's Georgia. If I'm really trying to decide who's the better team, like if I'm picking them to play tomorrow, I'm picking Bama to win because JT Daniels isn't healthy. I think quarterback's the most important position on the field. We saw Stetson play Bama. Like it can only get you so far. Right. But like if I'm projecting toward the end of the season, or if I'm like who's the better team, I think Alabama has a top 5 offense and a top 10 defense. I think Georgia has a top 10 offense and the number 1 defense. Like that is the separation. That is a transcendent unit on defense, and it's not close between 1 and 2. I would lean Georgia's the better team, and they're number 1 in my rankings this week. So
also special teams, they're both great in special teams. Georgia has really field position wise, and yes, there's teams that they've played that have been overmatched, but you can only play who's on your schedule. They have been elite on the special teams unit.
And that's part of Bill Connelly's 5 success factors. Like explosiveness is one, turnovers is one, but field position, as far as like the 5 success factors for football, is huge. And Georgia leads the country in field position. So a big part of their success there. All right, enough talk about the top tier. Those are the top 2 teams, and they proved it this weekend. Let's move on to potentially another top 4 team, depending on who you ask. Cincinnati goes into South Bend. You and I picked Notre Dame to cover and win this game. You hedged your bet there, though, on our side pick. You laid the points with Cincy, so smart there. I think Cincinnati was better. I just couldn't fathom Notre Dame being a home dog to Cincinnati. And so that was really my only I can't justify Notre Dame getting points at home. Like I'm picking them. I don't know
Right.
how they're going to win, but they're going to win. And gosh, since he tried to let him stay in it for a little bit, I thought Notre Dame was going to keep it a game. And I mean, turnovers in the red zone for Notre Dame. And since he blew him out in the score, didn't really blow him out in the stat box, but neither team could really run the ball. But I mean, Jack Cohn just that both interceptions that were in the red zone is what killed Notre Dame. Um, but Cincinnati, look, the path is laid out. We said if they were playing Indiana, who is coming off of that 8-win season. They're playing Notre Dame, who's been in the college football playoff 2 of the last 3 years. If they run the table, like they have the best chance. I'm not going to say they're 100% in, but they've got by far the best chance of any group of 5 team that they've had to get into the playoff. And I mean, super fun game though. The fact that Cincinnati can go into Notre Dame Stadium, their fans showed up. Like there's a lot of red in that stadium. Like I was listening to it in the car and I hear a lot of cheering and I'm like, oh, Notre Dame just scored. No, it was when Jack Cohn threw the interception in the red zone. I was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of Cincinnati fans there.
Yeah.
I mean, super impressive win. Desmond Ritter didn't look amazing, but again, they put together a total game and the defense turned the ball over when it counted.
Yeah, this is a great example of a complementary football team where they play with one another, offense complements the defense, and you just talk about game control. They controlled this game.
They did
from the start. So, which was surprising to me. So I, I obviously hate myself because for the pick because I even said I think Cincinnati's the better team, but you and I both kind of got hung up on we just can't fathom a group of 5 team. We got stuck on labels. That's what it was. A group of 5 team coming in to Notre Dame, and Notre Dame has points. Like we just couldn't. It just didn't compute. Like we ran the numbers a million times. It just didn't make sense. Like in our brains, and so I just couldn't. I just couldn't do it. But I should have because Cincinnati just came out and showed that they're just the better team, and this is the year for Cincinnati. I just think that Luke Fickell's got his group. Obviously, everybody knows Desmond Ritter, but the defense was really the story at how they just controlled the game, controlled the line of scrimmage, made those timely interceptions when they needed to, and then, I mean, you just make it difficult. And a Notre Dame offense that they don't do one thing elite, so they kind of do a bunch of things okay, and they usually can just throw a bunch of darts at the board and points end up on the board. And sometimes they'll play someone like Wisconsin who gives them the game, with turnovers. And that just wasn't going to happen here. Like I said, complimentary ball. Desmond Ritter didn't have the greatest day, but he also didn't have a bad day. He had just a solid performance.
Yep.
He scored some touchdown, threw a touchdown pass, ran for a touchdown. So just impressed with him as a leader of this team. I do think that kind of thing is important for the rest of the team to see. They need kind of that face of the group, someone who's going to step in and lead when they need to. This is a big win, and I know that we both know that, but it's like you just have to really think about what they went and beat Indiana on the road. And yes, we don't think a whole lot of Indiana at this point, but that game in a normal, like what Cincinnati is supposed to be, that would be a big game. But Cincinnati has elevated their program status, and I think that's what we need to take recognition of. Luke Fickell has elevated this program above. They're just in a cycle up year. I do think that, yes, they do have all the pieces where they could run the table, but it's not uncommon for a Luke Fickell coached Cincinnati team to beat Indiana in any year. And then now at Notre Dame, I mean, yeah, Notre Dame last year may have beaten them, but I don't know. This team believes what they're doing. And yeah, I just can't get over that complimentary ball. I think that that's going to take them a long way. The schedule opens up, obviously, and there's a clear path for them going
Yeah.
forward. But if I'm Cincinnati, just enjoy this ride. Don't take anything, don't look too far ahead because you could stub your toe on someone in conference. And you don't want to do that after setting yourself up for such a great opportunity.
Biggest win in Cincinnati history. I can say that with confidence. Um, their schedule, I'm looking at it now. Temple, UCF, at Navy, at Tulane, Tulsa, at South Florida, SMU, at ECU. I'm just watching the way they've played. Again, college football's crazy, but I don't see more than one loss. And they're going to be favored in every game. SMU is undefeated to this point. They get that game at home. UCF hasn't looked great. I mean, they lost to winless Navy yesterday. So,
Well, and losing Dylan Gabriel, they're really in a bind right now.
all right. I'm like, ECU, I think those were the toughest two games, the last two games of the season. But hey, Cincinnati, hey, long season to go, but enjoy the ride. I mean, biggest win in program history. Hats off.
You mentioned you don't want to talk about playoff necessarily. It's like one of these things where let's enjoy these other things.
I'll make an exception for Cincinnati.
Cincinnati could be that one opportunity where a group of five makes sense to go to the playoff. And I wouldn't be arguing with it at this point from what I've seen.
No, they played. They're out of conference. They played a Big Ten team, and I mean, like Notre Dame on the road.
Do I think that they would probably get run by Georgia or Alabama? Absolutely. But do I think that about everybody else in college football?
120 other teams? Yeah.
So yeah,
that's exactly what I think too.
So
I mean, where do you want to go next? I have an idea, but
I want to talk about Auburn and LSU if you don't mind.
Ooh, okay.
That late night game in Baton Rouge in Death Valley, a game that we saw Bo Nix actually start after there was a lot of speculation that TJ Finley would start. I like the move by Brian Harsin because I think it took the pressure off of the team. Now, I know that sounds weird, but he put Bo Nix out there. Bo Nix struggled a little bit. He put out TJ Finley. TJ Finley made a couple plays, but still didn't do a whole lot different. And then Bo Nix came back in, and Auburn's kind of got that little lucky gene where they tend to do some things. Bo Nix did that scramble where I was watching the game, and it was a 4th and 2, I believe. And I just remember thinking, you're not out of this game. You need to really just kick a field goal. You're in field goal range. This is Auburn. I'm like, just go ahead and kick the field goal. It's 4th and 2. It's not 4th and 1. It's 4th and 2. And I don't think I like your play calling much after watching the Penn State game where you ran a fade on 4th and goal, and that didn't make a lot of sense. So 4th and 2, 2 yards, and they went for it. And as soon as he drops back, I'm like, this play is doomed. He scrambles around one way, scrambles around another, escapes a sack. He escaped like 5 sacks in this game, and then throws a touchdown pass. I'm like, I just don't understand how this works, but sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. And that he did it. I do think Auburn as a whole had a lot of pride, played this game tough. I don't just want to credit this win to Bo Nix being lucky, because I think that would discredit Auburn's defense and how they played. This game was a statement win on the road in Death Valley. I don't care how good LSU is or isn't. If you go on the road at night in Death Valley anytime, that's a huge win. So credit to Auburn for going in there and doing this. I think this is huge for Brian Harsin in his first year. These kinds of wins are the ones that kind of help gain, I guess, traction with a fan base, because I think there's a lot of fans that have still kind of had it in their back pocket. Like, I don't trust him. He's from Boise. I think this was a big trust me game for the Auburn Tigers and for their fan base. So great for Brian Harsin. I still not a fan of some of their play calling in certain key scenarios, but it is what it is. I think this is a team that has, some growth potential in a lot of areas. But my question to you, Jacob, is this loss for LSU, already being the second loss of the season, this is the first time, that LSU has lost to Auburn in Death Valley since 1999. is Coach O the next Gene Chizik? And if so, are you already thinking, I'm not trying to rush this, but I've got a couple candidates that I think for that head coaching job with
Oh yeah.
LSU, because I don't really trust that. I think he's fired, but they're not going to do it until later. I think they might wait for another loss, because if they fire him now versus in 2 months, I don't think it necessarily matters. What say you?
I do think this is like that was it for Ed Orgeron. I agree with you. And the last time Auburn beat LSU in Death Valley, LSU fired their head coach before the end of the season in 1999.
Okay.
So signs are there. I'm curious your candidates because Josh Pate said this in the late kick that there are agents who, when the USC job opened up, they said we're not pursuing anything until we know about LSU. As in, they thought LSU would open up, and that's a better job than USC. And you and I would agree with that because we ranked the best jobs in the offseason. We had LSU as the second best job in the country. So I'm curious your candidates. I think I have one obvious one, but go for it.
There's one candidate above all else, and I have no question.
Is he in state?
Huh?
Is he already in the state?
No.
Oh, all right. Go ahead.
He would be my first call if I'm LSU.
Okay.
I'm making him tell me no. I'm calling Joe Brady. He's already an offensive coordinator in the NFL. And if he's an NFL guy, then he's going to have to turn down my money to stay there, because I'm going to tell him I want him to come be the head coach of Louisiana State University. And I'm going to turn this back into what it was supposed to be in 2019, because then it is the Auburn effect. They fired Gene Chizik and they brought in Gus Malzahn.
Brought in the OC from the Natty.
From the Natty, exactly.
Okay.
So, and then you get
brilliant.
to decide.
I hadn't even thought about that.
Then you get to decide if it was Joe Burrow who did it or Joe Brady who did it. But I'm saying, look, Joe Brady right now, this is the time to get him, because as soon as he's going to become a head coach in the NFL in 2 years, because he's already doing a great job at Carolina and doing what they do to their offense. You've got to give him some sort of promotion. So obviously bringing him in as head coach here would be the move. He would be my first and only choice. I said I had candidates. It's a guy with two first names, Joe Brady. Okay, it's Joe Brady.
I mean, I'm calling Billy Napier.
Yeah, you can.
That's
call
why I
Billy
said in
Napier.
state.
This is if he hangs up on you and laughs you or says whatever, or just works it into a contract negotiation with Panthers. Great. Then you go Billy Napier. That's fine. He's a great coach. But Luke Fickell, I mean, I would call him at least because of what he's done. Napier makes sense because of his ties to the South. But yeah, no, Joe Brady or bust.
Joe Brady. Wow. Yeah, credit to Auburn. Great game from the Auburn defense, especially in the run game, allowing this 1.2 yards per carry. LSU could not run the ball, threw the ball 46 times, but hey, Auburn, get that offensive line some work. Got a big old test next week. Best of luck. But hey, great win for Auburn. First one since 1999 in Death Valley. And yeah, I agree. I think this is nail in the coffin for Ed Orgeron. Doesn't mean it's going to happen this week. I think it would have already happened, but I think losing to Auburn's not a great sign. Starting 3-2 isn't a great sign because you haven't even gotten to the hard part of your schedule. I mean, you still got to play Ole Miss, Arkansas, Bama, Florida. Like, there's 4 very losable games at this point.
When you're stacking losses before you've played Bama, it ain't going to be good.
Yikes. That's right.
Like, you're talking best case scenario, you're looking at 8-4.
Right. And that's not LSU's expectation. Yep. That's fireable at LSU when he won the Natty 2 years ago. Let's stay in the SEC because Kentucky did something they haven't done in 34 years, and that's beat Florida and Lexington. Another streak ends, and I mean, I think I'm looking at Florida, and I mean, first of all, credit to Kentucky. I think they played a great game defensively. They held Florida in check. They made special teams plays. That block field goal ended up being the difference maker for the game. It's a 10-point swing in favor of Kentucky. They didn't give up. Again, they kind of went back to Kentucky ball with the power run game. Only threw 15 passes with Will Levis, and so for the Kentucky offense we saw in the first couple of weeks, that was revolutionized. They actually played kind of Kentucky brand football against Florida.
Yeah.
Again, kind of a theme this week. They beat Florida. I want to shift the conversation to Florida because, I tweeted this and then several other people were commenting on it as well that, well, this will be a real fun press conference for Dan Mullen. And did you watch any of it?
I did not watch any of it. I heard some of the question about him being outcoached or something. And
it was as good as if you've ever seen a Dan Mullen press conference. I mean, it's always entertaining, win or loss. I mean, he came in a Darth Vader costume last year at one point. It's just
after he incited a fight with Missouri.
Exactly. Yeah, it's pretty predictable at this point what you're going to get from Mullen. And here's why I don't put him in like top 10 coaches. I think great coaches take responsibility after a loss. And Mullen is one of these coaches who just deflects after a loss. I mean, after the loss to Alabama 2 weeks ago, he's somewhat like just kind of acting like it was a win after losing to Alabama. Talking about how, the year before, what's the gap between Florida and the top? It's 6 points and then 2 points. Well, you're 2 weeks removed and you lose to Kentucky by 7 points. And something you haven't done in 34 years, which is lose in Lexington. And bottom line is you did get out coached. And for someone who's an offensive mastermind, it's time to look internally because the game plan down the stretch was, I mean, to put it bluntly, it was awful. Florida could not move the ball. Florida could not score. And this is an offense with a ton of offensive weapons. Emory Jones is talented. We talked about how I thought Florida was kind of turning the corner with making the offense around Emory and not doing the opposite. I did not understand the offensive game plan that's playing for Florida. And it makes me concerned that this is not their last loss of the season outside of Georgia. Because I think at this point, that's a given.
I watched a decent amount of this game just because it was on a second screen for a while. And then the last little stretch I had on the main screen where I was actually listening to it. And it was it seemed like Florida just couldn't put them away. And then obviously when Kentucky hangs around, I mean, they make you play such an ugly game and you just kind of hate what you're doing because they just make getting on the board so difficult. So obviously you had the blocked kick that was returned. That was impressive, but that was a long field goal that they were going to attempt in and of itself. So, that usually contributes to that. Then that last drive, Jacob, I mean, it just seemed to me, not that Kentucky was just going to give it to them, but they were definitely thinking, hey, they need a touchdown right here. Let's not lose. Let's keep it within the 20. They can keep it within the 20s. So as far as those, I don't necessarily call them empty yards because I think Florida did a good job of getting open and doing that kind of stuff. But
yeah, they play prevent until the red zone.
Once they got to the red zone, so Kentucky makes the stop and then gets the penalty, and then there's 4 more fresh plays, half the distance to the goal, and Kentucky still keeps them out. So 8 plays of trying to score a touchdown, and Dan Mullen, who is supposed to be a elite offensive mind, with Jacob, an offensive line that you and I have both been very impressed with in the run game. I just didn't understand. I felt like they didn't really try to run the ball in that scenario, and they put it on Emory's shoulders. And while I think Emory has improved in some aspects, a lot of his improvement is because he's doing a lot more in the run game. And I feel like when they got down to the red zone, they didn't utilize all their strengths. Like they really should have been trying to run the ball more. Um, of course, just in general, if you're going to be thought of as one of the most elite offensive minds, I would think that in 8 plays, one of those is going to be able to score a touchdown from within 10 yards. So that was surprising to me. What's not surprising to me is, Mark Stoops just being just a heck of a coach and really the defense just standing tall when it mattered the most. This is one of those bugaboo games for Kentucky. It's similar to how it is for Auburn going on the road to LSU. Similar for Kentucky, just in general with Florida. They broke the streak, a couple of years back or a few years back in Gainesville, but they still hadn't won, like you were talking about in Lexington. And so to do that in front of that home crowd, I know that meant so much to this team. They're 5-0 now, so look out. Kentucky is not playing basketball just yet. They're still in the SEC East, but that was just an ugly game. If you're a Florida fan and something you want to probably forget about, Kentucky, the fans have probably watched the game 4 times by now because it was just exactly what they want to do. But yeah, I just came away just very, I guess, disappointed in the play calling down the stretch from Dan Mullen, especially in the red zone, because I felt like that was something that they should have definitely scored on that last drive. They had the ball and they were ready to go.
On a points per play basis, Florida averaged 0.18 points per play, which would rank 127th in the country. So there's again, you did get out coached. Like you ran 71 plays and scored 13 points. That's unacceptable for Florida. So, I mean, season's not over for Florida, obviously, because it's week 5, but you're sitting here with 2 SEC losses looking up at Kentucky with none, Georgia with none, and now are you going to finish 3rd in the East? You got that one over Tennessee, but I mean, season's not over. So long way to go for Florida. And hey, shout out to 5-0 Kentucky. Florida State maybe should have hired Mark Stoops when they had the chance. He's a great football coach.
only has 1 SEC loss.
That's true.
So Florida's looking up at them right now, and Florida is also looking at. Obviously, you mentioned that Kentucky would have to lose twice because of the head-to-head.
Yeah.
And even if Florida was to beat Georgia, which does not look likely, but if they were to beat Georgia,
not at this point.
If they were to beat Georgia, then they'd still need Georgia to not only lose. Well, they need Georgia to lose another game in the SEC. So, and for Kentucky to have 2 losses. So,
right.
I mean, this, eliminates their chance of Atlanta.
Right. Let's shift to the West Coast. You had another big upset. The Thorn and Oregon side, the Stanford Cardinal beat Oregon in Palo Alto. And I mean, we kind of said it. I didn't think this team was above losing 1, if not 2, multiple games after beating Ohio State.
Right.
They played that game masterfully, but I think you kind of saw the Anthony Brown that we expected in this game. 14-26 for 186 yards, no touchdowns, 1 interception. It's kind of the quarterback we expected. They've run the ball really well, but I mean, their running average wasn't amazing this game because they ran the ball so often. Like they racked up, over 200 yards rushing, but they ran the ball 54 times. So 4.2 yards per carry. That's not awesome. It's not bad either. I'm running the ball, but I mean, it goes to overtime. They can't put it in the end zone again. Anthony Brown just did not look very capable in this game, but I read some stuff on Twitter and online saying like, oh, Pac-12's out of the playoff. Like, again, let's pump the brakes. This is 1 loss. It's 2021. We've already seen the parity in college football. If Oregon runs the table, they got as good a shot as anybody. So let's pump the brakes. But this is 1 loss, and it's not what you want if you're Oregon. I think it's hilarious that Stanford has lost to Kansas State and who else beat them? Oregon State, but they've beaten USC and Oregon. Just hilarious. So shout out to the Cardinal, David Shaw. I don't have a ton more to say on that game.
Really, just the biggest call out for me for Oregon, CJ Verdell gets injured. He was obviously he went off against Ohio State, has had a good year so far. But other than that, I just, you know, like you said, Anthony Brown is great in that like game manager role for the sheer fact that like he can complete, those intermediate to, um, line of scrimmage type passes and let players make plays. He can run the ball, and obviously, when you have a strong run game, that whole complementary football thing with Oregon's defense and the whole thing. But in a game like this, where Stanford comes out and attacks and gets up 10-0 and then 17-7 and just controls this game, it took a lot of energy for them to come back in this game. And credit to Stanford. Tanner McKee, seems like a difference there at quarterback since they've made that change. So he might kind of resurrect them a little bit from what they've been in the past handful of years. Maybe they kind of get, split the difference from what they used to be to what they have been recently. Kind of a more formidable team in the Pac-12. But yeah, this hopefully CJ Verdell gets back and gets healthy. But it was kind of a clunker for Oregon, a team they feel like they should have beaten and dominated, and it just was not the case.
Last game I wanted to hit was Texas A&M and Mississippi State. I'm just pulling up Jimbo Fisher's contract details that he got extended right before the season. Oh yeah, that's right. He's now making $9 million a year, and his contract increases by $100,000 each year through 2031. Huh. Interesting. Hey, shout out to the MVP Jimmy Sexton for getting this deal done before the season. Look, I know your starting quarterback's hurt, but I mean, this is abysmal. You recruit the way you do to handle this kind of stuff. You didn't lose to Alabama on Saturday with your backup quarterback. You lost to Mississippi State with your backup quarterback. Like, you scored 7 against Colorado with your backup quarterback. You only scored 10 against Arkansas with your backup quarterback. And now you've got Bama coming to town. So get ready for a bloodbath in College Station on a Saturday night, because, I mean, I don't even feel this isn't a hot take, and I don't feel bad like confidently saying that. I mean, if you're not moving the ball in Mississippi State or Arkansas is a good defense, but Colorado, like, you're good. It's going to be a bloodbath next Saturday night. And it's really not going to look good for Jimbo. I'm sure the message boards have already been hilarious. They're only going to be more hilarious when Bama wins by a larger margin than they did last season. We'll see. But 52-24 is the score to beat. So we'll see what happens in prime time on CBS.
I just feel like Bama is going to be able to name their score.
Yep.
On offense and defense. So, I think it's just not, everybody tried to tell me that A&M was going to be on their level this year. This was the year that they could get Bama. I just really wasn't feeling it. And then, Haynes King, I felt decent about him. And then Zach Calzada has just not impressed so far at quarterback. And this isn't really just a quarterback issue. You and I talked about this before the season, how the past couple of years, this offense has had an issue with explosive plays, just ranking towards the bottom of the nation of the entire, NCAA of FBS, where they just are just not that impressive. They've been in like the hundreds with as far as their, explosive play and all that kind of stuff. I think Isaiah Spiller is a special back. He's running against a young offensive line that I do think has a lot of talent. And in 2 years, come and talk to me, because I think that they've got several freshmen and sophomores who are going to be some dudes that are going to eventually get drafted on this offensive line. But again, they're young. They lost 4 starters. In the SEC, especially, you've got to have these starters on the offensive line and defensive line ready to go. And it does not seem like they're ready to compete with the teams even on the same playing field or below them, much less in Alabama. So, yeah, this was one of those games where I'm just not walking away. I'm walking away impressed with Mississippi State for kind of circling the wagons and stealing a win at Kyle Field. But I bet CBS is kind of regretting having an 8 o'clock game with Alabama and Texas A&M that they have to try to hype up. And then in the second quarter, they're going to have to start coming up with topics to talk about because the game is not going to be as interesting, you know? So, well, you know, their ratings are going to go down because nobody's going to stay up because, you know, CBS 8 o'clock kick means 8:35 and then
10 p.m. kickoff.
Halftime's at midnight, and then nobody's staying up for that. I promise you.
When the sun comes up, the fourth quarter will be wrapping up in College Station.
I'll wake up in the morning and see if anybody made halftime adjustments because Saban is going to have a 35-point lead at halftime.
We're gonna record our reaction pod when that game starts.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a long night Saturday night for A&M. Daniel, I am tapped out, but I'm excited for the rest of the season. I'm excited for next week. Another loaded week full of games. Another big point spread for Georgia and Alabama on the road.
One quick shout out to the Deep South's newest rivalry.
The Deep South's newest rivalry. You need to coin that, man.
I coined it. I put it on Twitter. Hopefully things start happening for me. But Kennesaw State, the 3 times they've met with Jacksonville State, 3-0. Kennesaw State takes them down in dominating fashion this time. The last 2 games have been very close. Dominating fashion, 31-6. Go Owls.
Hootie hoo, go Owls. You can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.